Good evening, Bulls fans. This is Matt Gritzmacher with UBBullRun.com. For the first time in about a month, I'm rejoined by John McWhinney, who came to Bull Run initially to write wrestling, and I had slowly roped him in to helping me out with Olympic coverage. And then he disappeared for a bit this semester as schoolwork caught up, and now wrestling started, and I've got him back. As always, it's 10 p.m. on a Sunday, so we're talking UB's Olympic sports from the weekend, all the non-football, non-basketball stuff. And really for the third straight weekend, we've got a very positive stretch of days going for us. It's not quite perfect, but a lot of good things, especially in kind of the sports that even within the Olympic sports get a little more attention, the soccers and volleyball. Really good results from all of them this weekend. We've got a lot to say. I did mention, though, we'll jump into it quickly because we've got a lot to say, that wrestling started their season today. They were here in D.C. At the University of Maryland, so I was able to go watch them. They started their season at the Terrapin Duels, which is hosted by the University of Maryland. And last weekend we had seen their blue and white inter-squad scrimmage that kind of was the final wrestle-off to determine the starting lineup. And today we saw them in action. They started their season. Whenever someone starts their season, they get first billing in our show. And they had really a heck of a day. They went up first against Davidson and beat them 47-0, which is a lot of points. The best you can do is 60, and that would be pins or forfeits right down the board. And zero's a good number to prevent the other team from scoring any. And then they beat Maryland, which we'll get to. It's a pretty big deal, and it was a great result. But I was hanging out with Tyler Rill's family in the arena, and I was telling them that I'm not really the wrestling guy. I know how points are scored. I know how things happen, but John's the wrestling guy. So John, I guess there's some significance to Davidson. It's a big win. It's a blowout win. And then really what I want to talk about is Maryland, because that's what's got us amped up on Twitter all day today was the win over Maryland. So whatever you want to start with.
Yeah, the Davidson win is significant in the sense that we shut out a D1 opponent for the first time since the 99-2000 season when we demolished Syracuse. I think that was like the last or second to last season before they shut down their program. So that's a fairly big deal. And going on to the Maryland win, it was great. The Big Ten is the premier conference for wrestling in the nation. The MAC is, I'd argue, is second, and then the Big 12 is right up there. Maybe the MAC is a 2A, the Big 12 is 2B. But to beat a team, and by your account, handily.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk about this.
I only got to go off, what the small updates I was getting from Twitter after your phone died. And once we hit the point where Muhammad McBride won, and then we hit Joe Areola and he won. I was like, all right, we can do this. Then when I saw James Benjamin had won by major decision, then I kind of freaked out, and then it really set in that we beat a Big Ten team for what I believe is the first time in program history. It's fairly significant.
Yeah, I found 4 previous wins against Maryland in the early 70s. They were obviously not Big Ten at the time. And let's see, I found a win against another ACC team against Georgia Tech. There's a win against Boston College when they were Big East. But I went back and went through because you had mentioned it, and I couldn't find any Big Ten wins either. As you talk about kind of the things that you saw on Twitter, and as my phone was working, I was trying to give period-by-period updates. And I brought my extra battery pack today, and this is usually good to recharge my phone 2 full times. So I was going to watch women's soccer and keep tweeting. But what I didn't bring was the cord that I needed to connect the battery pack to the phone. And so I got off the train. It's about a 2-mile walk from the train to the campus, and I'm walking. I said, I don't have the cord for this. And so my phone only lasted so long. But I've read through what my Twitter said. I read through what you said once you took over Twitter. I read through what Maryland's Twitter was saying, what the various recaps had to say. And people who are commenting on this are talking, UB kept it close in the matches they lost, and they ground out a couple close matches, and they really got a solid win. That was not the vibe at all in the room, especially once Tyler Rill got the win and put UB kind of into the right direction. Tyler Rill going into McBride. I guess I'll start and work backwards here. Rill, McBride, Areola, Benjamin, those four from 157 to 197 are so much stronger, just not necessarily, yes, stronger wrestlers, but that's not what I mean. They're just physically stronger than UB had at those weights last year. I'm remembering matches against Eastern Michigan and Columbia in particular where we talked about this in the offseason, John. The lighter weights would come out, and you'd get to Wally Maziarz at 157, and he usually lost, but after him, they were within shouting distance within a match, or maybe they were still up if he won. And then it all kind of fell apart after 157. Today we got 4 straight decisions from them. Tyler Rill came back from injury, and the guy from Davidson at 165 had to forfeit because he suffered a concussion in their first match. So Rill won by forfeit in his first match, and this was his first bout back from his injury last year when he tore his hamstring. I don't actually know if he tore the hamstring. He took the hamstring off the bone, which is probably even worse than clean tearing the hamstring. And what we got from Rill probably was this kind of grinded out match that people are envisioning, but it wasn't. He was up 2-1 from the beginning with some riding time. He got the takedown, rode him, and the guy escaped in the last 10 seconds. And then he got an escape very early in the second period, and they grappled standing up for the whole time. And then the other guy got the escape early in the third period, and they stood up grappling. And through all of that, if Rill is taken down, it's an entirely different bout. If it happens in the second, they're tied. If it happens in the third, he's down. But he really wasn't ever at risk of that. There were no shoots that were too dangerous. He never looked like he was stalling. He never looked like he was running away. He just took it to the guy, and by the last minute or so, you just knew that he wasn't going to have it. And that only brought UB to within 9-10. Muhammad McBride comes out, and this dude is so strong compared to last year. He's just obviously physically on another level from where he was last season. And he was a good sub last year, at 174. He kind of split time with folks in the second half of the season, and he looks so much more cut and a lot more muscle mass on him. He's still, if you guys don't know about Muhammad McBride, he's only 18 or 19. He's a senior. He was homeschooled and graduated from ECC, or went to ECC and transferred into Buffalo, and he's a young senior. He's now ridiculously strong. He only won 3 or 4-0 against Davidson, but it's because he didn't need to go for any takedowns. He didn't need to go for tilt points. He just kind of pulled the guy down and hung on him. And that's what he did here against Maryland. And in this match, we saw something that I really saw from John Stutzman today that is a big deal in that, and you kind of mentioned, John, in your talking down, you saw Rill got his win, and then McBride got his win, and then you're really looking at Areola. That was exactly Stutzman's mentality. And I think that Stutzman is a real good vibe for momentum, and he really understands the mentality of his guys out on the mat, because Muhammad went mostly scoreless through the entire first period, and they had kind of a flurry that ended up on the edge of the mat with 15 seconds left, and the refs were resetting them, and Stutzman challenged, and they got the 2 points. And that changed everything, because from then on, McBride just sat on the guy. He rode the full 2 minutes in the middle set, and then escaped very quickly in the third set. I don't know if we call them sets, periods.
Yeah.
And that put UB up. And then we got Joe Areola, and Joe Areola, he didn't come out real focused. Again, just like Rill, he didn't ever really look in danger, but he wasn't quite going. And Stutzman had to get in his face and say, "We need you right now. We really need you." And Areola's moved down a weight class this year. You've talked about that, John. Mm-hmm. He was really last year, and I, as a novice wrestling fan, I know everything I know about wrestling I've learned from John. And you can know so much, but there's technical stuff you don't know. But as a novice wrestling fan, last year Areola always had these timely takedowns, or he'd get up and he'd have a 2 or 3 point lead and he'd extend it with another takedown. He's real good at that. This year, that still happened, but he's also used to wrestling with the strength that he needed at 197, and now he's doing it at 184. And he was just stronger than his opponent, just like McBride was. And once he got out of once he got the escape out of the second period, he got a takedown somewhere in there and just rode him, and the guy couldn't do anything. And then the guy got to within 3-4 in the third period, and he did it again. He got another takedown. It was this combination of old Arreola and what you'd expect when he comes down, and that was 15-10. And at that point, Maryland can still come back. Maryland against Pitt in the match before had a 15-10 lead, and Pitt came back and took it. James Benjamin was as impressive as any of these four that I'm going through in detail, and I'll stop. James Benjamin, another guy, just strong as hell, just really had his way with Wisniewski from Maryland. Kind of close early thing. He got a takedown late within the last 20 seconds, and the guy did get up. But then he didn't get taken down. He started on the bottom in the second match, and it looked like the guy was about to tilt him. And the whole bench stood up and was yelling at something. I couldn't tell quite what they saw, and they all calmed down. And 15 seconds later, all of a sudden, Benjamin basically did one of those things where they stand up and spin around and jump over the back of the guy's legs, and all of a sudden he's got the reversal.
Mm-hmm.
John knows what I'm talking about. I don't.
I'll get into like the nitty gritty, but I mean that's a pretty apt description for a novice just looking at it.
The guy had him by his ankles, still as he had been trying to get out of being on the bottom from the start of the period, and he just kind of jumped up and spun around and flopped back down, and he had 2 points from the reversal. And then I don't know why, but the guy let go of his ankles and he spun around and immediately tilted him and got a 4-point near fall, and that was the match. And then he's up 8-2 with 30 seconds left in the second period. UB's then he takes that. UB's up 19-10, and that was the match.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, but my point in blow by blow of all this is, one, it was really impressive. Two, through none of those four did it feel like UB was going to lose. Did it feel like they were hanging on to avoid a takedown that would turn everything? Mm-hmm. Even when it was close at the beginning, they were bigger, they were stronger. If they weren't in control, they at least weren't threatened. Mm-hmm. And, Gunning came out and lost the last one, but he was never really threatened. Gunning had some chances for takedowns they didn't quite finish, and then the other guy had a takedown that he did finish. And the same thing happened with Estevez against that guy that Estevez went against is real good. He's tiny and compact, and nobody can take him down because he just scoots backwards. But in UB's late wins in that stretch, those guys were not threatened, even though they were close. Gunning and Estevez very easily could have won. Cotton only won 2-1, but with that riding point, but he was very much in control for his whole stretch. He went into the third period with 2 minutes of riding time. The only reason he had a point against him was he got called for a penalty for hitting the guy's face or something. That's what the signal looked like.
It was grab. You can't grab the headgear. You grab the guy's headgear. You're not allowed to do that.
Okay.
Just a couple things before we move on. You talked about Joe Arreola, and last year he came out kind of hot the beginning of last year. Then I think it was like once we got to MAC play, he kind of cooled off and went kind of on a losing streak. Then he dropped down to 184. And I remember watching the Eastern Michigan and the NIU matches, and he ragdolled the two guys that he wrestled there. And I figured that's what he was going to do down at 184 this year. And from what you said, that kind of seems like it.
Let me remember what he did against Davidson, because against Davidson, he only won 7-2 against Davidson, but the guy had no chance. I mean, he at times he had a takedown with one arm at one point against Davidson. It was
let's see who else. The guys that Jake Gunning and Estevez both wrestled, saying that they were close and like they could have won. To me, it's a good sign because both of those guys are actually ranked. They're two of Maryland's ranked guys, especially the guy that Estevez wrestled. He had like almost 40 wins in open competition last year when he redshirted. And
you could tell he was good because he was about 3 feet tall, and all of his mass was in his rib cage.
Mm-hmm.
And you couldn't shoot him because he just basically fell down and kicked his legs backwards, and he was so low that Estevez couldn't do anything, and at times Estevez got an ankle and couldn't quite claw up to the waist to really pull him down. And there was 2 points where I thought he had a takedown, and Stutzman thought he had a takedown, and it wasn't awarded. But he had all the momentum in the last 2.5 minutes of that one, just couldn't quite get the third and fourth points. Gunning the same way. Gunning had the guy by a leg 3 times. It could never turn it into 2 points. Sorry.
Which that's promising though. Like just being able to finish out a meet, especially a kind of a gutty win like they had against Maryland, and like you mentioned earlier, like the 165 to 285 last year was what I like to call the dead zone, where once we got past, Soria, Peacock, Estevez, and Cotton last year, you didn't really get much. Maybe Rock and Nadoke won at 165, or Ariola won while he was at 184. Other than that, you didn't really get much.
Yeah.
But now, the guys are bigger, faster, stronger. They've got more experience, and this team is on the rise. And probably the one I'm most impressed with is James Benjamin.
Yeah.
He's been a starter since his freshman year. He was kind of thrown in at 285 his freshman year, which, if you look at his record, it's pretty poor. But he was probably maybe 210 at most, wrestling guys that were upwards of 250, 260, and he was at a pretty serious size disadvantage. Then last year, he got down to his more natural 197, and he's still there now. And he must have really impressed Coach Stutzman to get him to redshirt Nate Rose.
Yeah.
I think he's showing that. And he's got a nickname, call him Gumby. And that reversal you mentioned, that kind of reminded me of why we call him Gumby. He has a really kind of weird wrestling style. When you watch him wrestle compared to other guys, he's really loose, relaxed.
Yeah,
he's really, when he's on, he's really fun to watch wrestle. So I expect some big things out of him this year if he can keep this up. Another guy, Kyle Akins, we didn't mention.
I do want to. Yeah, that's exactly where I was going.
Former top 100 recruit, won by major decision, 14-2. Then have a nail biter by all accounts, a 6-5 win.
I mean, Akins' match. Honestly, Akins' match was the most nail biting on either side of the UB Maryland. He went into the third up 2-1. Having gotten he started on top, the guy got an escape and he got a late takedown, and then he got the escape quickly in the third, and let's see, that made it 3-1, and then somehow the guy got a takedown in a 2-point near fall, and all of a sudden he's down 3-5, and there's maybe 50 seconds left at this point, and around 20-25 seconds he got the escape and stood up, and in the very next shoot he got a takedown. And it was probably that was the one match that UB won that they didn't control for 50 or 60% of the time. And he was the better wrestler, and that really set the tone for UB, because I think that every single one of UB's matches, they controlled the third period. Except for Gunning. But Gunning had 2 very near takedowns in the third period, and he couldn't quite finish either of them, and then he got taken down. Even Lantry gave up. Lantry didn't score in the third period, but that was different because he was going for broke to avoid the major, and he at least avoided the technical. So, but I thought even starting with Estevez and Akins, UB really won the third period of every match, if only emotionally, but most of them points-wise too.
And in addition to those guys, while you were covering them in Maryland, I was following online at the Clarion Open, where we had true freshman Justin Patrick, true freshman Nate Rose, Ryan Cromer.
Rock there? No, I'm thinking of Russo, who also didn't wrestle.
I'm trying to think who's the last one. Sean Peacock.
Peacock, that's right.
Was there. And Patrick came out, first 2 matches, won by technical fall. Really impressive. Then his third match in I believe it was the quarterfinals. Yeah, it was the quarterfinals. He wrestled Jake Gromacki from Pittsburgh, who actually Max Soria faced him last year at the Southern Scuffle and beat him 3-1. Patrick lost 4-3. It was a pretty close bout. Then he got bumped down to the consolation bracket, and from there he was I believe he was 1 win shy of. Yeah, he was 1 win shy of placing. So a pretty good start for him. 2-2 isn't too bad, especially considering who's going against. Sean Peacock, same thing. He came out pretty hot. Technical fall in his first bout, then upset the 4th seed 4-1, but then lost in the semifinals 9-3 against the guy from Clarion. He lost to the number 1 seed, and the guy from Clarion, he's a pretty impressive wrestler. Then Sean got knocked down in the consolation bracket, and he wrestled for 5th place, and there's no result.
Anyone?
Yeah, there's no. So he was either 5th or 6th. They don't have the result up. He was wrestling the 3rd seed for Virginia. So Flow Wrestling didn't update that. Ryan Cromer at 174, he lost his first bout, which the guy was from Cleveland State. He was, I believe he was a sophomore, a redshirt sophomore. But then Cromer reeled off 3 straight victories to put himself within 1 match of placing, and then lost 3-2 to a guy from Penn State, which there's no shame in that at all. Penn State's one of the best in the country. And Nate Rose, he came out, won his first match by technical fall. Then lost to a guy named Phil Sprinkle from Lock Haven, who we might see later this year at the Northeast Duels. And Sprinkle, I believe, was an EWL place finisher a couple of years ago. I think he was 3rd. So then Rose got kicked back down to the consolation bracket, and again he was wrestling for 7th place, and there's no result. So
okay,
who knows?
Well, then he won.
But all in all, I'd say a pretty good day for wrestling.
A pretty good day for wrestling, yeah. And they've got 2 weeks until those Northeast Duels that John is talking about. And we'll have more exciting things to say then. And then at the end of the month is the New York State Wrestling Championships, Collegiate Wrestling Championships, which I was really, as a novice wrestling fan, got really engaged in last year. They were a lot of fun to follow. Lots more teams there than you'd expect. 20 minutes on rowing or on wrestling, that's all right. They had a big day, and they opened the season. Very quickly, I always say very quickly with rowing, but we refuse to ignore rowing entirely, but we also don't know how to talk about them. They had their last of 3 regattas this fall. Also here in kind of the D.C. area. I wasn't able to get to them. They were at the head of the Occoquan, which is in Northern Virginia. And after two weekends this year where I thought rowing, I don't think that looks too great. I'm not sure what's up. I was very impressed by the results here in Virginia to close out the fall season. They put 3 boats in the varsity 8 race, finished 4th, 12th, and 18th. 2 in the novice 8th, finishing 7th and 11th. And 2 in the varsity 4 finished 7th and 15th. But those races were fields of 26, 21, and 31 respectively, and they beat teams that they'll see again. They beat teams from West Virginia, teams from Pitt, teams from Delaware, teams from George Mason, Duquesne. These are teams that they'll see a lot in their spring rowing, and some of them are in the Colonial Athletic Association, which is the conference that rowing is in. So hard to talk about them with any substance just because they kind of exist in a vacuum. This race was a different distance than their last race at the head of the Housatonic in Connecticut, so I can't even compare the times, but I can say that they finished much higher in a larger field than they have in other times this season. They've beaten schools that we know they'll see again, and they came across some schools that are pretty solid. So a real good finish to the fall for rowing. Speaking of good finishes and good finishes of the fall, men's soccer is really, we're very happy with men's soccer. We've talked, and I've talked, John hasn't been with me since the men started MAC season, but I've been talking about how men's soccer has deliberately scheduled only their MAC games to close out the season. So they've only got one match a week and focus entirely on that. And how men's soccer had the benefit of the home side of the imbalanced home-away schedule that comes with a 16 conference. They had 3 home games and 2 road games this season. And they've taken advantage of their home matches, gotten a win, a narrow loss to Akron, but everybody's going to lose to Akron, or at least not beat Akron, and then got a win against West Virginia, went on the road and got a critical result against Northern Illinois, and then this past weekend was Senior Day against Bowling Green. Long story short, they've done what they've needed to do, getting wins at home, getting a point or 2 on the road, really focusing on these games, and they won against Bowling Green, and that basically clinched their spot in the MAC tournament, which in a 16 conference is only 4 teams, so they're into the MAC semifinals. It was a heck of a game. I don't know if John wants to say anything first or if I should go to highlights. He's on mute, so I don't know.
Talking to myself. I had initially thought when I was watching the Bowling Green game that it was going to go to overtime, maybe even penalty kicks. But Russell Cicerone, if he didn't lock up Player of the Year after that last goal, I don't know what he has to do. I'm watching it on my screen, and you're pulling it up too.
I'm pulling it up, yeah.
Yeah,
we're getting ready here.
I have the GIF of it up on my screen, and
so I'm actually gonna move back a bit because the whole reason that the last 10 minutes were amazing is because Bowling Green managed to score in the 75th minute or so, and this was a game where UB had plenty of chances and Bowling Green had plenty of chances. And really what we got was in the second half, 5 or 6 minutes at a time of each team giving it their best shot. And over the course of the half, Bowling Green's chances got a little bit more and more. Chances got less and less dangerous. This is this period of Bowling Green time, and I think this is actually going to be the play that results in the so you saw that bounce off Alec Fisher's arm right there. I'll back it up just a moment as I continue to talk. Most of UB's chances were aerial balls in the box that the goalie came out and either misplayed. It's going to happen right here on the bounce. You see it hit his arm there. Fortunately, he was out of the box, or else it would have been a penalty kick. But UB had their chances, couldn't ever quite convert. I didn't think the Bowling Green goalie looked too strong in this game, but he always did just enough over the first 84 minutes at least. I'll not spoil it too much more. We did tell you that they won, and we've already name-dropped Russell Cicerone. The Bowling Green goalie didn't look too good. Joe Kuda was asked to make a lot of saves, and he did good. He had 6 or 7 in the game. He had 6 before UB started scoring, and I don't know if he had to make one more, or if one of the plays I'm thinking of was actually credited as a save. And this is going to be Bowling Green's goal, and really it's a free kick from just outside the box, and it's pretty hard. It was hard to watch at the time because this is something that I think Joe Kuda should have, where's my cursor, come off the line and come out into this space to come and grab it. There's really nothing he can do if he tries to stay within his net if someone tries to tip it in. and that goes straight in. That's not tipped in by anyone. It's just put straight from his foot into the net. I know it doesn't look like it, but I would have liked to see Joe Kuda come off his line there. And so coming into this game, I figured UB needed one more win out of either this home game against Bowling Green or the road match against West Virginia to get into the MAC tournament. But not West Virginia, Western Michigan. But Western Michigan is the one team to even get a point from Akron this year. They were able to draw the Zips. They have been ranked at times this season. Just like UB, they returned pretty much their entire starting 11 this season. That's going to be a real tough test. And, as I said before, it's really important in soccer to take care of your home turf. And at this point right now, there's 15 minutes left, and UB could be going to a pretty significant hole heading into the last game of the season. And what we got, if I haven't really spoiled it too much already, is 2 goals in the final 6 minutes on senior night. And after I said, the goalie really was able to get plenty of loose balls and aerial balls, and maybe didn't play them perfectly, but got a little bit lucky all game. We're going to come in on a corner kick here, and the goalie's going to punch it away, and it's going to fall right to Marcus Hansen. And there's no masterful scheme ability there. There's nothing going on except Marcus Hansen knowing, watch him, where is he? This is him right here. He's, instead of running into the crowd, he's going to back up into space. You see hockey players find a lot of success doing this. He's going to move around, and the ball tends to bounce into space, so he's running out into it. The goalie comes out, he just punches it instead of catching it, and Hansen just bats it back on frame, hoping that it bounces around. So that's the equalizing goal on Marcus Hansen's senior night. About 30 seconds after fellow senior Dylan Cope got into the game for the first time on senior night. That's pretty great in its own right. If UB had gotten a draw here, they'd still probably be in pretty good shape for a tournament bid. Maybe not ideal, but this was a goal that honestly might have saved the season. And I'm going to skip ahead now to Russell Cicerone's goal. And I wanted to play the video for you, but it's too loud for me to talk and play the sound, excuse me. It's too loud for me to talk and get the sound reaction at the same time. This is the run-up to Cicerone's winning goal. You're going to see a misplay right here from Forrester, that is, and really UB almost gets burned. Unfortunately, that's the one I'm not sure if they're counting as a save or not. I imagine they're not. But Kuda comes out and kind of saves Forrester's bacon there. And from here, I don't want this to be lost. Watch Steven Stryker here make a great play, kind of physically beating out the defender there, their fullback. And then he gets it to Russell, who just does what he does. And if you haven't seen it already, that's worth watching a million times.
And runs over and drop kicks the flag.
Runs over and drop kicks the flag, just like Zlatan. Let me dial back. What I really want to highlight here, I went back a little too far, is watch what Russell does immediately as he gets the ball. He's going to make sure he keeps the ball and shield the defender, but it also works himself into space. And even though he's going 1-on-2, he's basically able to run all the way into the 18-yard box without being touched. So the ball's going to bounce, and Stryker's going to outplay his man, move forward, get it to Russell right here. Russell's already spinning, and he gets it into space, and now he's here. He said that he got caught up a bit and had to catch himself. I would prefer to think that he did all of that from the beginning on purpose, and that some of that amazing dribbling wasn't a recovery move, but rather all planned. But basically, once he got around the goalie, it's game over. So here he's already spinning into space. He led his defender in as the ball was coming, and then the ball arrived in space because he put the defender on the other side of him. That's an absolute, I talk at times of Ben Sugimoto, who is a former editor of the Spectrum. He's written a lot of soccer stuff. He's the soccer color commentator, play-by-play guy for FC Buffalo. He's now got a new project, the Buffalo News, specifically on soccer. I kind of default to him at times. He called it a world-class goal, and that's as John said, the goal that should put Russell Cicerone into MAC Player of the Year, ink his name on the line. It's his 11th of the season. He's the first guy to score 11 since Steve Butcher in 1999. To go along with that, I think he's up to 8 assists now. Yeah, 8 assists because he's up to 30 points on the season. He's only a junior. And after this game, Stu Riddle's always been talking about Russell Cicerone is one of the best in the country. After this game, Stu Riddle said, I think he can go to the top. And I've been thinking, Russell is set for MLS. Next year he'll get drafted in the MLS, and that'll be great, and he'll start his career there. Stu Riddle is probably talking Europe or the national team when he says going to the top. And I think that Russell could play in a number of the top flight leagues, top national leagues in Europe. He could play in Spain for sure. He could play in Germany for sure. He could play in Italy probably. The top flight, the Premiership in England, I'm not sure, but even the Championship in England, the second tier, is as good as most other countries' first tier. And I think he could play there. And so we've still got him for another year. Right now, the Bulls are sitting – that's what else I wanted to keep the screen share up for. I won't bother to pull it back up. But right now, the Bulls are sitting third in the MAC, technically tied with Western Michigan, but Western Michigan has the tiebreaker because they drew Akron and Buffalo lost to Akron. It's one game left for everyone, and UB has not only clinched a spot, they've clinched no worse than the third spot. They'll finish either second or third. And basically what it breaks down to is they're almost certainly playing Western Michigan. There's a kind of really tough scenario that only happens once out of every 9 possibilities that they face Akron, but that's unlikely because Akron would have to lose to Bowling Green. Basically, Buffalo's facing Western Michigan, and I don't think they get to host their first game like the women do if they move up into the 2 seed. So if UB beats Western Michigan, they're 2. If they don't, they're 3. If Buffalo loses to Western Michigan and Akron loses, then Buffalo takes Akron in the semifinal because then Western Michigan will pass Akron not on points, but on a tiebreaker that I can't remember what it is. On a better result against Bowling Green. That's like the 5th or 6th tiebreaker by that point. So UB's pretty locked in for men's soccer. They'll face Western Michigan next week, and they're all but certain to face Western Michigan again 2 weeks from now in the MAC semifinal. And so it'll be interesting to see what we see from them next Friday in a game that doesn't really matter unless Bowling Green somehow turns it on against Akron. There's a lot of bad blood between Western Michigan and UB. Stu Riddle came here directly from Western Michigan, and when he did, he brought 3 of his recruits, who you might know. They've played a pretty big role in UB's season and a pretty big role in all the highlights I just showed you. He brought, listen to these names, John Alec Fisher, Steven Strico, and Russell Cicerone were all committed to Western Michigan. And when Danny White hired Stu Riddle away, they came to Buffalo with Stu. And
even just Cicerone, like literally the best player they lost out and looked like the best player in the nation.
Yeah.
I think I'd be pretty salty.
Jordan Morris, but let's not. Jordan Morris of Stanford is probably better than Russell Cicerone. He's got a couple games with the national team already, but yeah,
one of the best.
One of the best. Additional bad blood. The current coach of Western Michigan, who was Stu's assistant, was the club coach. Was Russell's and Steven Striker's club coach all growing up. Like these guys have all known each other for 15 years now. And when you look back to last season, UB scored 2 goals in the final 5 minutes to tie Western Michigan. Russell Cicerone earned a penalty in the last 10 seconds to draw even. That came with a lot of bad blood. And all but likely these 2 teams are going to face off twice in 2 weeks. It'll be really interesting. I think that Stu may hold his hand back a little bit in this match, and I don't hate that idea. He's proven over the course of this MAC season to be really tactically strong. And if UB comes out kind of simplistic on Saturday afternoon, I wouldn't be super surprised, and I wouldn't be too worried about it. That's all I have from men's soccer. John, I don't know if you have more.
No, I don't really have anything else for men's soccer. I've been between school and being on the road lately. I haven't gotten to catch much.
Okay. Well, another quick one. Another team wrapping up its fall season. Women's tennis finishes at the ITA Invitational, but starting last year, Western Michigan started putting together a fall weekend tournament for the men's teams the weekend after the ITA Invitational. And last year, the men's team's progress, I don't know if I said the word tennis. I'm talking tennis now. I don't think I actually said that in the minute that I was talking. Last year, UB really dominated Western Michigan's Invitational among the 6 max programs. Last year, maybe there were 9 flights, and UB won 5 of them and had finalists and 2 more. It was really 1 more, excuse me. It's really a strong showing, and even though the Bulls struggled through March, really in the spring, that weekend at Western Michigan is when we saw that UB was really championship caliber, and then they went out and win a championship. This year, there were 9 flights once again, and UB won 4 of them, which was once again the most of any school in the tournament, although Western Michigan did have 2 flights where they had both finalists. They always look pretty strong. Northern Illinois always looks pretty strong, and UB under Coach Nickel always seems to pull an upset or 2 in the MAC tournament and make it to the final over the 2 of them. So I don't worry too much about them. But, real quickly, they won singles fights from Akil Mehta, Sergio, and Tony Miller. I don't try to pronounce Sergio's name because even when I practice, I can't get it. But I talked in the past about UB men's tennis, how their depth kind of from that 3rd to 5th singles are really important. They scored a lot of points. Damian David and Pablo really struggled last year in the regular season, and when UB won, they were winning because Sergio and Noah Haidu-Anderson and Akil Mehta were winning at the bottom. And we got Akil, Sergio, and Tony Miller winning flights this weekend. In addition to them, Amar Hromich was in the A flight, which is a little bit of a step up for him because UB didn't have Pablo Alvarez this weekend for whatever reason, and Amar made it to the final of the A flight, so that's a real strong showing as well. On top of those singles results, UB also got a doubles win in the second doubles fight from Noah Haidu-Anderson and Ethan Natolo. And Natolo is a freshman that he's, I believe, the only freshman on the men's team. The women have a couple freshmen more. But Natolo is someone you should be very excited about. I've talked about him at other times this year. I've talked about him when he signed his NLI last year. He's a 4-star recruit in tennis from New York City, which is a pretty big tennis area. And he's really stepped up and shown something already this fall. He had a very strong first match that we just kind of ran out of gas at the ITAs last weekend, 2 weekends ago, whenever it was. And it's very impressive. He's probably going to step in, I think, in the fall as UB's 3rd singles. I think it'll be Pablo Alvarez and Mark Hromich, then Ethan Natolo, then Sergio, then Haidu-Anderson as the top 5. And that's a really strong 1 through 5 that I would feel pretty confident in. And then they'll rotate the 6th, I imagine. But strong showing for men's tennis. They, for the 2nd year in a row, were I would call the most outstanding. You could call it the winningest team at Western Michigan's MAC Invitational. We're about 40 minutes in now. Another quick one that I don't think John will have anything to say in women's swimming and diving competed at Miami this weekend. Swimming and diving always has a busy October, and they really slow down in November and don't race at all in December and then pick things up again in January. So October has kind of been for racking up times and getting people comfortable in different distances. But they have competed against MAC opponents as well, which doesn't really matter except to get times and kind of see how you stack up for the MAC championships, which is the only thing that does matter for conference bragging rights. So the women went to Miami, and I wouldn't call it too great a day, to be honest. They lost 170.5 to 129.5, which sounds big. It's not necessarily that big, but really UB was hurt a bit by depth. Over 16 events, they had 7 winners, which is close to 50-50. That's pretty good. And they had 9 second place over 16 events. That helps to make up some of that ground. But Miami really dominated in the 3rd and 4th place finishes. In one relay, Miami only entered one race, so UB got 3rd and 4th in that relay. But in the 15 other events, Miami took 21 of the 30 possible 3rd and 4th place finishes. And that's really how they got that winning advantage against the Bulls. And I don't know if UB traveled with the full team or not, but that's how you get the lopsidedness. Kind of saw a familiar story from women in this. They dominate freestyle races as they did in the MAC championships, as they did all year last year. And then we got some wins in the butterfly, which is very exciting too. Megan Burns, if you don't know the name Megan Burns, I hope that you're watching for the first time because we seem to talk about her all the time. She won the 50, 100, and 200 freestyle. Jess Powers, as she does, picked up the slack in the longer races, winning the 500 and 1,000. And then in the butterfly, had two names that I'm real excited about. One is freshman Julia Box, won the 100 fly. As I said, freshman. She's very versatile. I'm excited to see her in a lot of different events this year. And in the 200 butterfly, we had Circe Palu Benson, who has really improved over the offseason. She's also pretty versatile. I'm excited to see her in more places than just the butterfly. That's swimming and diving. Real quick, just the women. They're next in action November 19th, 20th, and 21st against Bucknell. Well, not against Bucknell. At Bucknell's Invitational. It's their only races in November. That brings us to cross country, who also finished their fall. No, they didn't finish the fall season. They raced against the MAC. John, I feel like I need to let you talk. And I feel like you can talk about cross country for at least a minute.
Yeah. So if people were paying attention earlier, earlier this fall semester, when we initially talked about cross country and them early in the season, we were kind of hyping them up as if this was going to be a year where they were going to step up and, push the boundaries as to where they had finished in the MAC championships. But then on the men's side, especially, injuries took over towards the end, and the men, who I believe, if I recall correctly, you said that they would probably finish top 3.
I thought they'd be top 3, yeah. They just missed out on top 3 last year. They finished 4th by 3 points, and if their lead runner doesn't factor this, but if any of their other 4 runners last year had run 3 seconds faster, they would have been top 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought they were a superior team this year. Even once Brian Crimmins went down, had knee surgery, they didn't have him at the Paul Short invite, and they ran amazing there and jumped all the way up to 9th in the Northeast. And I thought they could be top 3, but Jack Jibb rolled an ankle, and Andrew Burge had an injury of some sort. And I was under the impression they'd both be back for the MAC championships. And Jibb was, but ran more slowly and wasn't able to keep up with UB's lead guys. And Burge appears to not have even made the trip back to.
Saying that, it was a little bit of a disappointment. Men finished 6th, and the women finished 4th.
4th or 5th for the women? Did I look it up wrong?
Yeah, it says 4th on our.
Yeah, I typed that in wrong because I was talking about them being 4th. They finished 5th, which the women had finished 7th each of the last 3 years. So a jump up to 5th is pretty solid, but also a kind of letdown there again. And they're the freshmen who had been leading them, just like Jack Jibb on the men's side. Sharday Henry, who John and I are very high on for a number of reasons, running aside. We like her taste in movies. Had been leading the Bulls all year, and she ended up finishing 4th among the Bulls, scoring 5. And I thought that she could run up, and I thought that she was 10, 15 seconds ahead of everyone else on the team, and she didn't in this race. And the Bulls were led by Amy Shaw, who had a very strong track season last year. She ran very well indoors in the 3,000 and 5,000. Outdoors ran some very good times in the 10,000. I really liked what we saw from Amy Shaw, and she's continued that into cross-country season, so it was good to see her lead the way. But just like Jack Jibb on the other side, kind of expected Sharday Henry to lead the Bulls, and she didn't. And 5th place for the women is a big step up from the 7th they were in the past. I thought they could finish 4th in this race, and I guess they were only off by 1 place, but I thought that they'd finish it with relative ease. And it's not the end of the world. But the MAC championships, there's a reason we don't see UB compete against MAC opponents very much in cross country, because just like tennis, it's more regionally based, and the UB's in the Northeast because they're in New York State. Everyone else in the MAC is in the Great Lakes, except Northern Illinois might be in the Midwest region. But they're in other regions, and we don't see them very often. And while the MAC championships are important for bragging rights, the regional championships in 2 weeks are just as important. You can get to nationals from them as well. And that's in New York City, and that's going against all the teams that we've seen, that we usually see when the women go compete at Iona's Meet of Champions, when both teams go to Paul Short. We actually saw less of them this year because the teams went to pre-nationals, but still another chance for cross country, and that race arguably means just as much to the season and to the goals of advancing some runners to nationals, if not the whole team. I don't know how realistic a goal that is right now, but we did see a lot of improvement from the women this season, and they're all very young. If I keep them open, I don't have their classes in front of me. But the men don't have any seniors among their top 7, and the women, I don't want to say something that I'm not sure of right now. Corinne Burchard might be a senior this year. Might be. I don't want to say it for sure. But the women are, for the most part, returning next year. Women are trending up. They absolutely are. I thought that they were moving a little more quickly than it seems that they were, which is okay. And the men, still a fine year. You can really point to those 2 injuries to Jib and Burge and say that that's pretty much it and the reason, and I think it is. But it's still kind of just a bummer to see them there. That, I think, wraps up cross country. It brings us to women's soccer, which John and I deliberately try to put women's soccer towards the end so I don't get caught talking about women's soccer for 25 minutes. During the 1 or 2 weeks when women's soccer overlaps with wrestling, you've got my favorite team and John's favorite team, and we're really crammed for time here. But by my count, we've got at least 10 more minutes. We started late. It is 11 now, but we started at least 10 minutes late. Women's soccer, unlike the men's side, had a very challenging schedule this year in the MAC. All their tougher games were on the road. They had more road games than home games, and they closed out the season extremely strong, did very well to both catch Miami and stay in front of Kent State in the seeding. They came into their last game of the season against Akron last Thursday on the road, needing a win to guarantee third place. They had already clinched, by virtue of Ball State's victory over Miami earlier that afternoon, they had already clinched a home quarterfinal. But the win would give them third place for sure, and it would most likely give them Central Michigan in the road game. There's a way New York Kent could have fallen, or Miami could have fallen to 6th. But I was hoping for Central Michigan. And that's what happened through a bunch of other results on the last day of the MAC regular season. We ended up with quarterfinals today of Toledo at Western Michigan, Miami actually traveling to Kent State. The Redhawks really fell apart late in the season. Central Michigan coming to Buffalo, and then Akron going to Ball State in a tiebreaker situation so convoluted that I haven't actually watched the video of the women's soccer match yet because I was at wrestling. But from what I caught while I was pulling out highlights, the tiebreakers were identical down the line, and so it went to just a popularity contest of sorts, and Akron got in. And Akron beat Ball State, which is one of the most ridiculous results that has happened in the MAC in at least a year and a half across all sports. And I mean that. That's the level that we're talking about. I'm trying to think of something more surprising. Even Ohio volleyball had won 33 MAC matches in a row in the regular season. 33 in a row, got swept 2 games in a row right now. They're on a 2-game losing streak, haven't even won a set in a week and a half. That's less surprising than Akron beating Ball State today in the quarterfinals. That's the level that we're dealing with of how good Ball State has been and how unimpressive Akron looked against Buffalo on Thursday. That said, I said that I wanted Central Michigan. I didn't want to deal with Miami or Kent State. I wanted Miami or Kent State on the other side to beat up Ball State in the theoretical semifinal. That's not going to come to pass now, thanks to Akron. we got Central Michigan, and it turned into a bit of a. I'm very, very glad I wasn't actually able to follow this live because I might have been pacing all over Maryland's Xfinity Center.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I had it on
highlights, and they're going to make me very upset. But you go ahead, and I'll get the highlights ready.
I had the game on while I was following wrestling, so I had about 50 million tabs open on my computer, and I think it was in the closing minute. I was like, okay, I kind of took a breather. I was like, okay, they're fine. That's it. It's over. Oh, look, a little Inception.
Oh, is it happening? Good. Oh, there we go. All right.
Oh.
Let me get out of here.
I was like, okay, that's it. It's just about done. They can hang on. Then I hear in the background that they scored with 1 second to go, and my jaw just kind of hit the floor, and I was like, did that just happen? And it did, and it seemed like all the wind had get taken out of the women's sails, and we
should interrupt here to say they did win. They're moving on. They're going to the next semifinals for the 4th time ever, 2nd year in a row. The end of the day, it's a good result. They did win. Keep going, John.
And it seemed like all the momentum had swung into Central Michigan's favor, and I was worried. Luckily enough, it came down to the penalty kicks, and we just so happened to have the best goalkeeper in the MAC, and Laura Doolittle really shined in the penalty kick, and they won 3-1 on those penalty kicks. So it took a little bit longer. Probably gave some of the parents and probably even Coach Burke a heart attack, especially with the last second goal. But
I text Andrea Kniper's mom during games, and I'm very glad that my phone was dead and I didn't have to. We're gonna show highlights now. What makes this even more ridiculous? One, as John said, the sales really came out. You can't see my face anyway. I don't need to try to look in the camera. As John said, the sales wind really came out of UB sales after that late equalizing goal from Central Michigan. UB didn't register a shot on net in 20 minutes of overtime. Central Michigan committed a ton of fouls in overtime, so I assume that UB had the ball plenty. But and I'll find out as soon as we finish here, I'm watching this game, and I'm going to be very stressed out about it. Anyway, what makes this even more ridiculous is UB took a lead 2 minutes into the game, 2 minutes into the game, UB had a lead. And I don't know how far behind I am. Oh, this is going to happen right here. And so this is just some nice pressure from UB in the midfield. And this is pretty standard stuff. Moira Petrie's working it up, and this is going to become across the box. And the live stat said Bonatti got the assist, but somebody else must have gotten an assist too, because I thought that's Bonatti on the corner. And this is Petrie coming over. And it's a little bit hard to watch, but it actually gets fed over to Carissa Catrona, and then she puts it back kind of against everyone's momentum, puts it back into the far post from where she's standing. It's going to come down into this area and get put back in the net. It's going to work. She's going to tip it on, and Catrona puts it in there. That's 2 minutes into the game. UB's got the lead. They were working into the wind and still dominating. My phone was still working at this point, so I'm following results, and I'm very, very happy. And then, UB's working into the wind and dominating, and second half they're going to get the wind at their back, and the field's going to tilt, and things are going to be great. UB had some announcers for this game. They brought in Stu Riddle and Brian Wolf. Great, it's nice to have announcers. The camera work was much different than it normally is. Everyone's kind of, at least at this time, people are more zoomed in on that play, and that makes it a little harder to watch at times. What was really surprising here was that Central Michigan tied it up before Central Michigan tied it up, which is surprising in its own right. UB hadn't allowed a goal against Central Michigan since 2013. And what we're going to see here is this play is going to work its way to a throw-in. And the first thing I heard about this goal was a text that came in that said that could have been saved. And then I read about the game and how it went, and I saw some tweets about this goal against the run of play. And this is only the second time I'm watching this goal, and it makes me so mad. John, I should let you talk, but basically UB is a little bit a victim of the wind here, a little bit a victim of Laura Dougal leaving her feet a little early. Even at this point, John, I don't know when you started to tune in, but even at this point, UB's 1-1, and they've got the wind at their back in the second half.
Yeah, the hook on that shot though, God, that's just watching it. That just shows you how wicked the wind was here today.
Yeah. That didn't just hook into the net, but it actually hooked back towards the near post. That's a curve that I get on a frisbee. I don't want to watch it again. I watched it 3 times. That doesn't even make me as upset as the other goal. Unbelievable. That type of shot, though, that hooking shot from the left side is what Julia Bonatti has really made her money with. She doesn't make any money. She's a student athlete. But just that's what Julia Bonatti does. She scored a lot of goals with that type of shot. Maybe not from that far out. Maybe not with that much hook. UB would take the lead in the second half here. Like, this is what I'm talking about in the camera angle. It's nice, but when I try to go back and do posts with it, it's going to be a lot harder, and I like to see more of the field. Somewhere in here, the ball is going to fall to UB. There we go. Brianna Shingary. If you don't love Brianna Shingary after what she's done as a true freshman this year, I need to hype her up more. That is just an absolutely amazing goal, to take the ball for 30 yards like she does, to cut back in. Shingary all year mostly has been getting assists, but now has 2 goals on the season. True freshman playing on the back line alongside Jackie Hall. Or is she alongside? She's on the back line. I think she's actually alongside Kniper and Markovitz when they've moved around. Just makes things happen time and time again in breaking down a play for the film study posts. And it starts with Shingary, or Shingary makes a nice play or draws a defender. And this is a nice bonus of having more people on it, is I've got replays without having to skip back. And that is another Julia Bonatti shot, cutting it from that side, hitting it with the right foot and curling it into the far post. And it's fun to watch Cassidy Kidd's face on this, because Cassidy Kidd just almost can't believe it. We just caught the end of it, but we'll watch through the replays once more. This put UB up 2-1. They've got the wind at their back. This is after my phone has died, so I don't know any of this is happening. But if it were happening, I'd be feeling very good at this moment. You know, you can't say enough. She's going to be all freshman team, and I don't think she'll get MAC Freshman of the Year, but she has a very strong case for it. Just a tremendous goal, and her goal against Miami was pretty much the goal of the year, because it kept UB in front of Kent State. If not for that, Kent State would have passed UB and been 3rd, and Buffalo would have been 4th, which, the way things played out, they would be catching Akron in the semifinal, which would be nice. This is the important thing to remember as I skip ahead to the last goal, is that UB has advanced, right, John? That hasn't changed.
Mm-hmm.
And that they have advanced the semifinal, something they've only done now 4 times in 16 years in the MAC, 17 years.
More importantly, twice in the past 2 years.
Most importantly, twice in the past 2 years. We're going to watch CMU's tying goal, which comes so late that Stu Riddle was already talking about, how UB did enough to win and hunkered down. And, oh my goodness, this goal.
Literally with 1 second left on the clock.
That doesn't show up in the video feed, but this is literally with 1 second left, and that's not even what upsets me the most. What upsets me the most is not here. They're still going to clear it again. This isn't it. I don't remember what's going to happen, but they clear it. Something. I don't remember how long it takes, but it's going to upset me right here. Nope, not that. Where is it? Oh, Jackie Hall, no! Oh, it causes me physical pain. Jackie Hall was the MAC Defensive Player of the Year last year, and she hasn't quite had as strong a season without Sophie Therian. They've kind of been mixing up who, as I said, big change in the season was the switch from Andrea Kniper on the back line to Kristen Markovitz, but that's played a bit. But Jackie Hall hasn't quite had the same season, but she's still a tremendous defender. And this is just absolute flub. Literally all she has to do is keep that ball at her feet instead of rolling behind her, and UB wins the game in regulation. And I can't believe I'm doing this to myself to watch it a third time. But I am. That's just, oh, thank God. They won. They won. Let's just keep remembering that they won. I'm just going to scroll down here for the sake of it. The other thing that gives me a little consolation here is that 3 of the 4 games went to penalty kicks. We've already told you that Akron won and how ridiculous that is. Miami took 10. Miami on the road, as I said, they had really faltered late in the season. They took 10 penalty kicks and won the game there. The only game that went according to plan was Western Michigan over Toledo, which I thought Western Michigan was the ripest for an upset of the whole field because Toledo had been playing really hot. They finally had someone step up in Isa Echeverry. Western Michigan had kind of been slumping to finish the season. And then they went and beat Toledo 3-1. With Ball State out, I'm pointing with my hand, but I should point with my cursor. With Ball State out, Western Michigan is the highest remaining seed in the conference tournament, so they host the semifinal and final. So it's at Kalamazoo. 1 week ago, not even 1 week ago, 3 days ago, I was saying, boy, this bracket works out really great. Either Kent or Miami is going to beat up on Ball State. We saw UB take Western Michigan. You know, they drew with Western Michigan in the regular season, but Western Michigan's goal came on a miscue from Laura Dougal. You know, we know that UB can handle Western Michigan. I was more confident in that matchup than a hypothetical matchup against Ball State, Kent, or Miami. Now, Ball State's not in it anymore, and Western Michigan UB is definitely the tougher of the 2 semifinals. That's Friday, time to be determined, but UB Western Michigan is going to be the first game. So if it's anything like last year, it'll probably start. It started at 4 last season was the first game when UB played Ball State. Not a bad place to be in. It stinks a little bit having to face Western Michigan in their own house now. Western Michigan will be going for 3 straight appearances in the conference championship game. They had won the year before UB in 2013. On the other side, it's easy to look at Akron and say, you know, write them off just like I did against Ball State. But Miami plays the exact same style of game as Ball State. They play a very heavy defensive load with a good goalie. The difference between Ball State and Miami is Ball State had 2 people who could score. Miami doesn't have anyone who can score. And Western Michigan doesn't really have anyone who can score. I think their leading scorers have 3 or 4 goals. Akron could play the exact same game and get to penalty shootouts and win it again. That could happen, and it would be ridiculous. I don't want to do that. I want to leave sharing. I don't know. I have to come back. Anyway, that's the bracket. And UB can Western Michigan, they'll be the favorites for the championship, which is a nice thing to say given kind of their struggles this season, which aren't wildly unexpected, but were a little hard to work through, even though we kind of knew they were coming. This game against Western Michigan, I don't want to call it the de facto MAC championship because Miami shut UB down just as well as Western and Ball State did. But I kind of want to call it the de facto MAC championship, John. I don't know if you have anything more.
My preseason prediction of UB repeating as MAC champions is still in play, so I am more than pleased with that.
Well, my preseason prediction was they advanced to the semifinals again, so I'm done with my prediction, and I have none of that stress anymore. With that, we started late. We still ran a little long. Like I said, start with wrestling, finish with women's soccer. We're going to talk quite a bit. Third straight weekend where, oh my goodness, did we talk volleyball? We didn't talk volleyball. Crap. Volleyball won at Akron for a 3-game winning streak all on the road. That's a first ever. And they lost to Ball State, which I didn't think was too much of a surprise. Others did. Ball State's been very up and down this season, but they've been very good at home, and UB had to go on the road. But the bigger news, I've got to get to the shared screen again. The bigger news is that after UB beat Eastern Michigan and Central Michigan on the road, those two teams both continued to lose. That's women's soccer. Where's volleyball? Right here. So those two teams continued to lose, and they were both swept by Northern Illinois and Western Michigan this weekend. And all of a sudden, Buffalo's sitting pretty for a MAC tournament spot in volleyball. Akron, Bowling Green, and Toledo are basically out of it with only 2 wins max of those 3. And EMU is sitting 9th at 4-8. As long as UB stays in front of EMU, they're going to advance the MAC tournament for the 2nd straight year. Last year under Reed Sunahara was the first time ever they had finished in the top 8 of the MAC. This year, we were honestly looking at a winless season, or maybe a 1 or 2 win season. And now Coach Blair Brown-Lipsitz, with a ton of freshmen, having lost a ton of attackers, is up to 5-7 in the MAC, is up to 7-17, 6-17, 7-17. Overall, as you can see, they've really only beaten everyone below them, but that's all they need to do. They're up a game on Eastern Michigan. They go to Bowling Green, or they host Bowling Green this Friday. If they beat Bowling Green to move to 6-7, Eastern Michigan has to win 3 of their final 4 to pass them. They'd be in amazing shape to advance the MAC tournament again. I'm terribly sorry that we forgot about them until we had run out of time. John, I'm not even going to let you talk about them. That's the story of women's volleyball. They are doing amazing relative to their expectations, and frankly, to even make it in the MAC tournament would be a banner year, regardless of the situation, given everyone they lost and the turmoil over the season and how the season started with 1-for-11 stretch. Just amazing what they're doing right now. With that, we've definitely gone long now. Bunch of apologies to our volleyball folks, which is really Paige, who will have probably sat through 70 minutes of this for me to run through volleyball in 65 seconds. Sorry, Paige. We'll talk. With that, I'm Matt Gritzmacher, happily joined once again by John McWhinney. Another 3rd straight big weekend in a row for UB. Really, across the board, lots of good things. Even when volleyball doesn't win, they continue to move up in the standings. Wrestling's gotten the season starting and really impressed the hell out of us. Very strong, exciting. I wish more people could have seen that match because it was awesome. Both soccer teams are into the MAC semifinals. Cross country's done. Men's tennis is done. Rowing is done for the fall. Volleyball's rolling. I said that already. There's someone else, but I've forgotten. Swimming and diving. We'll talk about them later in November when they come up again. With that, this is UB Bull Run's weekend Olympic roundup. We go every Sunday at 10 p.m. This is actually the 12th episode of the show. I don't think I said that. We've been doing real good this year. We're only 12 weeks into the UB year.
Yeah, holy crap.
We'll all see you tomorrow when the group gets together for football. We'll be talking the win over Miami and looking ahead to Kent State. And John and I, at least myself, and I assume John again, I think life has calmed down a bit for him. Mm-hmm. We'll be on next Sunday at 10 p.m., as we always are, talking the weekend ahead, which will include the end of the women's soccer season, the end of the men's soccer regular season, going into the last weekend of volleyball, and we'll be previewing, I don't know what we'll be previewing, some wrestling and some cross country. All right, with that, long episode tonight. Thanks for sitting with